A lot of times if content doesn't work or if it fails, it has to do with how it starts. It has to do with what the hook is. It has to do with the transition is. Like the viewer needs to understand what they're going to be getting before they decide to invest, even if it's 45 seconds into that content.
Hello and welcome to Marketing Speak. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer. It's my pleasure to have AJ Kumar with us. AJ is a guru maker with 15 years in digital marketing. It's all about helping people shoot to stardom in their field with brand building content. With smart strategies for business and marketing, he helps them become the go-to experts. The golden touch to help the clients make millions online, get books in the New York Times bestseller list, and even land TV shows. AJ's upcoming book, which will be out later this year, is Guru Inc., The Business of Your Life. AJ, it's so great to have you on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. This is really exciting.
Yeah, so let's first of all start off with your superhero origin story. I just got enamored with your whole story of struggle and underdog finally winning from your about page. So why don't you start with your origin story?
Yeah, for sure. So I grew up in SoCal, took the same path that most people took in the sense that my parents wanted me to go to college, become a doctor, become a lawyer, etc. But that really wasn't the journey I wanted to take. So I ended up dropping out of college. I think it was after like the second semester. And I got into sales. I just felt really different from a lot of people growing up. I really wanted to, have this aspirational lifestyle. I used to have, pictures of Ferraris and Lamborghinis on my wall and big mansions and stuff. So I was always sold on that idea. And college didn't seem like it was the right path. So I got into sales at a company called the Mike Ferry Organization. The Mike Ferry Organization is a real estate training company. So I was basically a phone sales rep guy there. So I'd be talking to real estate agents. I think I was like 17, 18 years old. And I would be selling them on coming to seminars where they would pay like $300, $500 to learn how to become better sales agents. Eventually, I started doing really well with that. I became one of the top sales guys. I think I was like number 6 out of like 40 in the company. And then I started selling coaching. So I would actually go to the events with the speakers across the country, and I'd be in the back of the room and I'd help them sell coaching programs. My cousin, he was one of the coaches at this organization. He was a mortgage coach, even though this was a real estate company, they were starting the mortgage division. And he wanted to, take off and start his own company. He was really into Tony Robbins and personal development and just an amazing speaker. And this was around 2007, 2008 time. So I left Mike Ferry. I decided to become an entrepreneur and pursue the dream with my cousin. And then the market crashed. So all of a sudden we were in this really ridiculous environment where we were trying to sell these programs, trying to help people become successful. But, it was just a chaotic time. So we had to shift. So my cousin was really about like mindset training and mindset coaching. So we shifted from just working with mortgage reps and real estate agents to working with poker players, hypnotists, just people from all different endeavors, and then helping them become successful in their field. I did that for about a couple of years. And then at some point, me and him just started going off in different directions. I got in a car accident, so I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go to the office. I couldn't, do a lot of the activities. So I was basically stuck behind a computer. Around this time, I reconnected with a friend of mine from high school. It was a guy named Neil Patel. Him and I went to high school together. We actually shared a business class. Me and him were competing for the top grades. He would always get the highest, but I was closely behind at number 2. It was a business class, so it was a lot of fun. And Neil at the time even got me into selling these products on eBay. So we had a little bit of a business at that time. It just lasted for a few months before my dad got mad. But after I reconnected with Neil, like in my early 20s, he started introducing me to the internet and blogging. And at the time, I knew nothing about blogging. I really didn't understand the concept, but he told me to just start a blog and just talk about what I knew. And at the time, my subject matter was essentially persuasion. It was mindset. It was psychology. So I bought a domain called persuasive.net, and then I started blogging on that. And I talked about sales tips, psychology tips. There was even a time where I wrote a blog post about, the top 5 influencers at the time, and Tony Robbins was one of them. And Tony even saw that post and tweeted it saying, I'm glad I made it to the list or something like that. That was really great that I got this blog from just 0 to about 30,000 visitors a month. And at that time, didn't really think much of it, but Neil helped me start the site, build the blog, get that all set up. And that basically introduced me to the digital world, and then getting me more into SEO. And then he started introducing me to people that needed help. So he basically helped me start my own agency. So then I started working with some clients he would refer me to, and I'd help them with SEO. Some of them were big clients. Some of them were companies like Intuit, right? I did that for a bit, and I was able to grow my personal agency to, I think it was close to 6 figures. At that time, Neil introduced me to his cousin, Sujin. So Sujin also had his own agency going on, and it was in San Francisco at the time. I got introduced to Sujin. Sujin's just a funny guy. He's super smart. And basically what happened is we combined, and then we started Single Grain. So Single Grain was operating out of San Francisco. So I left from SoCal, went to San Francisco, and then together we took that company to a whole new level. It was a really interesting journey in that here I am, in my early 20s in San Francisco, and I'm meeting with these CEOs of these tech companies. Like, I remember going to Airbnb's office at the time. And at that time, Airbnb wasn't the Airbnb that we see here now, but it was an up and growing company. So I did that with Sujin for almost a couple years. And we were primarily working with corporate brands and helping them with their SEO strategies and dipping into social media as well. Social media was still a bit new at the time, didn't have the type of attention it has today. Something changed in me where I started gravitating towards personal brands and people. Like, the corporate stuff was fun. It was okay. It wasn't fun. It was okay. Like, we were getting people results. I wasn't getting this personal fulfillment, I think. At that time, I was introduced to a woman named Kimberly Snyder. Kimberly Snyder was an author. This was her book at the time. It was called Beauty Detox. So she was a celebrity nutritionist, and she had a blog. The blog was doing about 30,000 visitors a month. And I essentially took corporate marketing strategies and then applied it to a person, to a human. And what had happened after that was it just blew my mind, and it changed my life forever. We took her blog from 30,000 visitors a month to 500,000 visitors a month. It was a combination of SEO traffic and it was social media traffic. But essentially, it changed in just becoming this like personal blog to being a hub, a global hub. And at that time, I realized that the types of strategies that we were taking on were, we would see what other countries were doing. She's in the health and wellness space. And at the time, we knew that a lot of trends in America were originally coming from Europe. So, and India, right? Like, Ayurveda now is a lot more popular, but back then it was just very unknown. So we would use a variety of these different types of strategies of figuring out, hey, what's the next up and coming trends? What are people going to start searching for? What are people going to be interested in? And we'd create all these different pieces of content that would drive links, including things like infographic. Like, there was a time I was watching Dr. Oz, and there was an episode about him showing like what your poop and pee mean. And then I was like, oh, that would be a great idea for an infographic. So with Kim, I turned that into an infographic, and that one infographic alone generated hundreds of thousands of views. It started getting all these backlinks, and that page at that time would rank for what your poop and pee mean. And then we would take that concept and we applied it with one of our signature drinks, which is called the Glowing Green Smoothie. And then we ranked that for green smoothie. That keyword green smoothie alone, I think we got it to rank at like 3 or 4. And that in itself was driving like 6,000 visitors a month, right? So we had all these different keyword strategies in place. And as we were building the traffic, I was also working with her to take her expertise, take the stuff from the book that I showed you, and we turned that into a digital product. That digital product was like a 10-module course, and we sold it for about $147. And we did it product launch style, right? So first, we collected all of these emails, built up our email list to about like 50,000 people, right? All of that traffic, if you have 500,000 people visiting your site every single day, we had all of these mechanisms in place to collect email traffic. And then we would indoctrinate those people and weave in Kimberly's credibility and her authority into that story. So that every day people would be receiving these emails. And then once we had that product ready to go, we launched it, and it did about $100,000 in sales in 24 hours. And then it did another $100,000 in sales the week after. So that's when like it started clicking for everybody of like, hey, I think we're onto something. And then long story short, we'll talk about it as well. But so that model is essentially what brings me to where I am today, where I start working with subject matter experts, and I take their expertise and I convert it into different pieces of content, whether it's long form content, written content, audio content, or video content. And I help them essentially build a brand platform for that content to be exhibited and discovered by targeted people from different mediums.
Gotcha. And when you did that work for Kimberly Snyder, you mentioned the product launch style. You're talking about the product launch formula from Jeff Walker. Is that formula still valid and as effective these days as it was back then?
I think it's different now. I think now it's not just hitting people through one channel. I think you need an omni-channel approach to where people are getting your messages from different places. We didn't use that formula exactly, more than it was building up the anticipation, weaving in proper stories, and then opening up a launch for a certain period of time, right? It's a lot more intricate than that. But even today, that concept in general works, but only to a certain extent if you're not reaching people, across these different places, across these different platforms.
So you said that working with Kimberly as a client changed your life, your business's trajectory, and so forth. So how long did you guys work together for? Why did the relationship end, or why did you kind of, part ways?
Yeah, so I worked with her from about 2011 to about 2015. She had gotten married at the time, and there was stuff that happened with that. And I just continued to work with my other clients because by that time with her, we were successful with that digital product. And then we introduced physical products as well. It was like a subscription for probiotics. And I even modeled something I learned from Amazon, which is the subscribe and save model. Like originally we were just selling supplements one by one. And then we added a mechanism for subscribe and save. And all of a sudden we had 1,000, then 1,500 and 2,000 subscribers paying $50 a month for these probiotics. From that, and then as well as leveraging the brand that we built and the audience that we built for her, also turned into a New York Times bestseller 3 times. So I learned how to essentially, win the New York Times bestselling game from Tim Ferriss. I met Tim in 2010-ish, was introduced to him through, I think it was Heathen, which was Neil's old business partner. And I remember I was in San Francisco at the time, and I met him in, I think it was like a Thai restaurant, and he was explaining to me how the concept works. It's all about creating perceived value, and it's all about first 7 days of when the book gets launched. So we took that concept, and then with Kimberly, we created all of these additional pieces of content, all this extra value. It was like guides and recipe books and additional digital courses. And I think it was a couple months before the book launch. Then we started pushing that, and we got all these pre-orders. Once the book did launch, you automatically have all of these people that already bought. Plus we had all this promotion going on, and then she hit the list. And that's when I realized, okay, that's how this is gamed. How, like, what could this lead to, or how could we do that again? It happened 3 more times, essentially, which was the same concept. A lot of people do that now. The game is a lot different now than it was before, just because it's a lot more competitive, but it's essentially still the same concept. So at that time, like what I realized, which is kind of what's going on today, which is everyone's an influencer now, right? Like now there's influencer management companies, all these different platforms for influencers. That's what I realized back in 2015 was this is going to be a boom. Today, it's called the creator economy.
How did Kimberly end up partnering with Deepak Chopra? What a huge name to have him as co-author on her 3rd book. That was quite a boon. Did you have any part in that, or was that just a lucky break that she got, or some sort of synchronicity? How did that come about? Do you know?
Yes. So it was synchronicity. How I view all of this, it's all engineered essentially, because what I do for people is I help them create attention. And with her, at that time, she had 2 books that were New York Times bestsellers. Deepak knew her because he started seeing her. He started seeing her on the internet. He started seeing her on TV. He started seeing her more frequently. And Deepak works with people that are up and coming, right? And I think that's the case with a lot of different authors, especially like of his caliber. When you find somebody that's up and coming, you want to associate with them so that you could introduce them to your audience and have you being introduced to their audience, right? Like it's mutually beneficial. But she actually met him through a chance encounter in New York while she was walking. But I think that's the beauty of the internet. I think that's the beauty of creating content, is that these types of things occur.
How did you end up creating this new agency, Limitless? I don't know how long it's been out for, but you left Single Grain, or you and Sujin parted ways, and then you have this new venture. Tell us a bit about that and how that came about, and why this agency and not some other type of agency.
Sure. So originally I had started what was called Limitless Publishing back in 2011, around the time we had Single Grain. I totally got that concept when I was watching the movie Limitless. That movie was so cool and so amazing. Too bad NZT doesn't exist other than maybe Adderall, but I'm not sure if that's the right approach to doing NZT. But at the time, like, that concept was just really fascinating to me. I think I've been really obsessed with that concept since I saw that movie, because the mind is such an interesting place and there's so many possibilities and things that you could explore within yourself. So I had that at that time, Limitless Publishing. So Kimberly Snyder was essentially the first client for Limitless Publishing, but the model was a bit different back then, where I would like joint venture with clients and spin up these different companies. Whereas now it's kind of a hybrid agency model, where I'm turning it into a hybrid agency model. I don't even think of it as a agency more than I look at it as a content creation kitchen. I'll explain what that means in a second. So before, it was about written content. It was about blogs and, getting all of this Google traffic, which was amazing and exciting. As Kimberly's thing happened, I helped her launch her podcast as well, because in the podcast in around 2014, 2015, that became a platform of choice for a lot of people. And it is still today. Neil says something interesting about podcasting, whereas a lot of people think podcasting is saturated, and there are a lot of podcasts out there. But most people that start podcasts, I think, stop after like the first 3 episodes. And if you compare the amount of blogs there are to the amount of podcasts there are, it's crazy different. So I think there's still massive opportunities with podcasts. So creating that podcast for her started getting me into more of the audio realm. And then at the time, I also had another client that was in the TV space. So now, as I was working with blogs, as I was working with audio, I started getting introduced to TV stars. That led me to working with different network television companies and getting a little bit more insight and understanding to how the entertainment industry works. Because I came from marketing, and then I all of a sudden took a turn and started going into entertainment, because I knew that entertainment was something that I actually wanted to do a long time ago. I even remember having a meeting with Neil early on in my career where I was like, I want to be an actor. I want to be in Hollywood and stuff like that. That wasn't a great idea at the time, but today I have an office that's right next to the Hollywood sign, which is really exciting. I eventually started pursuing that interest in entertainment just because I was so fascinated by that idea. And 2015, 2016, everybody was talking about, oh, the future is going to be video. The future is going to be video. So I started diving into that. So around 2016, 2017, I started doing vlogging with clients. This was kind of early on, like still trying to understand it. Didn't really know much about equipment or filming, was just trying all these different things. And short form social media wasn't a thing yet, right? Like that became a thing a little bit later. But first it was like vlogging, it was YouTube videos, it was just getting familiar with the video environment. Didn't have a ton of success aside from creating cool videos that would sometimes lead to some opportunities.
It seems like vlogging is a term that really hasn't stuck. I don't hear people using that term anymore really that much.
Yeah, even though they kind of do it.
Yeah, they do it, but they don't call it that anymore. It's weird.
I don't know. I think it might have like a stigma attached to it or something. That period of time of like 2010 to 2020, there were a lot of YouTube vloggers and a lot of people were getting into the space. And I do remember meeting clients here and there, or prospective clients that wanted to monetize. It was hard for a lot of YouTubers to monetize in the beginning, because then at some point brand deals started to become a thing, but wasn't something that brands were investing in at the time. Got into more of the video realm, got into filming with, with TV stars, and like figuring out and learning how TV production companies work, just getting whatever insight I could from that. And then like the pandemic happened. And this was right at the time where like we were starting to get into short form videos, and we were starting to like build out the video agency. And then that happened, and that kind of, I wouldn't say messed things up, but it helped me look at things a little bit differently. It kind of put onto my radar that I want to figure out how to do this remotely, because otherwise it would take up too much time. The amount of coordination, like I get why production companies and TV shows cost so much money. It's so challenging to coordinate all of these different variables that go into production, that go into talent, that go in, because we're talking about reality TV here. Scripted shows is another animal in itself, but it's just so complex. So a lot of my time went into like trying to figure out how to coordinate all of the different pieces that go into it. And we're just talking about like the content creation part of it, not even like the marketing part of it, right? Like the marketing part I knew, but the content creation part of it, the capturing of it, the editing of it, that was all a new endeavor that I was getting into. And then at some point, as I started, I listened to Gary Vee talking about TikTok, and this was like people were really weirded out by TikTok. And I was like, I see it. I get it. This is the thing. This is the future, right? Because people saw things like Quibi, and they were like, okay, that's just a failure. And then it just wrote off the concept of short form videos because they thought Quibi failed. But Quibi came at a time that was a little bit too early, when there were so many other options that were available and a lot more entertaining, right? Like the Quibi shows were super scripted and super polished, but people had TV for that. So TikTok came along, introduced short form videos. It became this new place where people found entertaining value. And then I knew that, okay, I know where this is going, because at first it was just jokes and memes and funny stuff. And then I was like, wait, this is actually a great place to build a platform. So that's when I started realizing I want to get subject matter experts into this and help them become entertaining, right? Edutainment is kind of what that concept is called. A little bit corny, but it works.
Yeah. So how do you do that for yourself, and how do you do that for a client? If you could give us an example of somebody.
When I'm working with clients, everything I do comes down to 3 strategic objectives. I learned this from Bob Iger. He's the guy that was running Disney for a long time, which is number 1, investing in creativity, number 2, building a community, and number 3, expanding globally. So when I work with clients, essentially I'm figuring out what is their subject matter expertise, and then how can we communicate this in a creative way that's both entertaining and educational. And then as we get that process going, how do we build a community around it so that we have people that are talking about it amongst each other, not just with themselves in a silo, and then expanding globally into different markets, however they want to expand their business. The problem with content creation, just to take a step back, is that it's hard for people to invest in it, because traditionally, especially with internet marketing, you're looking at a straight ROI. And that just was the specific thing that people looked for. And for a long time, it was easy to understand it. You had ROAS, you had 10x ROAS. Whereas now I don't think people are getting those kinds of numbers, just because it's complicated, privacy, more regulations are being put in place. It's getting a lot more complicated.
And there's more competition, and the costs just keep rising and rising, which erodes the ROAS.
Yeah, exactly. So I basically needed to invent a different way to measure the success of content creation. So came up with a concept called ROAC, return on attention created. So ROAC is how I determine the effectiveness of a person's investment in creativity. I'm looking at both qualitative components and quantitative components. So I'll give you an example. I have a client right now. Her name is Nikki Haskell, Big Nick BH. Right now, she's this month alone, I think we've generated like 7-8 million views on some of her videos. She's killing it, right? I've been working with her since last July. We're absolutely killing it with her. And qualitatively, her life changed. Like it transformed. Nikki used to have a television show back in the 70s. And then after, that happened back in the 70s. And then I was introduced to her through a mutual acquaintance. She went from being irrelevant, right? Because she was essentially irrelevant from long ago, to becoming super relevant, to the point where all of her relationships changed, right? Because when I first started working with the client and we're creating content for them, the first thing that happens is the relationships change because people start to see this person differently. They start to see this person on a platform and they're communicating in a way where it's entertaining, right? Because of the way we create that content, and they're getting some kind of value out of it. That value could be LOLs, it could be like a motivational message. So with Nikki, we found an audience that didn't really think about in the beginning, but a little bit into it, we realized that there was this huge opportunity, which was Gen Z. So I've created the Limitless company. I call it like a ghost kitchen for content creation, right? And I hire a lot of Gen Z professionals, Gen Z creators. And then what I'm essentially doing is I'm creating a platform where we got creators on one side. Well, they're all creators, but they're, Gen Z creators that are part of the Limitless team on one side. And then we got clients that are subject matter experts on the other side. And I facilitate the collaboration between all the creators so that we're creating content that drives views and ultimately is helping the client achieve their result. So, for some clients, it's television shows. For some clients, it's a book or whatever their products are, right? So it just varies on what the goals are. When we're looking at ROAC, it's essentially like we're creating the content. What kind of impact does that content have? How is it changing the perception of the people watching it? You'll also start to see the difference in the quality of comments that people are typing in. All of that starts to rise up, right? And then quantitatively, we're looking at reach, we're looking at favorite ratios, we're looking at saves, numbers of comments. Stuff that was traditionally viewed as vanity metrics, I started seeing the value in how we could utilize that. Because social media platforms today, the way I see them, they're like countries. They have more users and countries have citizens. And just like when you go to a new country, you may have a culture shock. And that's essentially what happens when you are on a new social media platform, kind of like TikTok, right? For a lot of people in the beginning, TikTok was very strange, especially if you've never gone on TikTok before and you go on TikTok, you're like, what the hell is going on here, right? It's culture shock. So each platform has these different cultures which are being developed. But this is relatively new, right? Because everyone had the concept of social graph, where the content was essentially just being shown to people that or people that are connected to who you know, whereas now it's built around an interest graph. And an interest graph is so much more complex and beneficial, especially because there's really opportunities for everyone. It really comes down to a person being able to create content, creating it consistently, and iterating it along the way. It's kind of like software, right? I learned a lot from Neil. He's like a king of software. And when it comes to software, you're constantly just iterating the product over and over and over again until I don't think there's even an end, because you're constantly improving it. Same thing that goes with building your brand on the internet. You're putting out content, you're constantly iterating, you're constantly learning from it and improving it. So that's why if you looked at it traditionally from an ROI perspective, a month in, a 2 month in, you might not see anything, or you might not notice oh, I didn't make money from this, and you may stop. So that's why ROAC was created, so that you could look at it from a much more longer term perspective. I think it was Gary Vee that said, social media has a $1 trillion ROI. He said in a video once. And it's kind of hard to comprehend that. What does that even mean? Well, it's because, and the pandemic kind of helped show this, that everyone looks through the digital lens first before you see real life now. What you see online augments how you see people in the real world. So now companies understand that. A lot of people are starting to understand that. At least business professionals are starting to understand that, because for the longest time, there was a stigma with social media, right? You would hire your niece or nephew to manage your accounts. And I dealt with that for a good portion until the pandemic happened, where people would see it as My niece is going to do that, or my nephew's going to do that, or I'm not going to pay you to do that. It's a very like low barrier thing or whatever. So that's why for me, I've always focused on a very certain type of clientele, a clientele that's at a level where they're at the top of their game, and they're already a leader in their industry, and they want to become a leader for their industry. And that's what I'm helping them do.
And are you doing that for yourself as well? Are you kind of eating your own dog food, or are you like being kind of behind the stage or behind the scenes backstage?
That's a good question. So for a long time, I didn't do that. I just did it for other people. And that bit me in the ass over and over again until eventually I started writing a book called Guru Inc. And that's me starting my platform so that I could basically take my expertise, turn it into a product, and then build a brand off of what I've done for others so that I could eat my own dog food.
Right. And do you have a whole launch strategy for that?
Not yet. That's something that I'll be working on pretty soon, but I have a pretty good idea. I have certain people that it's different influencers, different people that I know. I'm also going to work on trying to sell that concept, but we'll see. Otherwise, I'll pursue a self-publish and build off of that.
Gotcha. Well, and then what would be an example of something that's really a standout piece of content that you're quite proud of that came out of this ghost kitchen for content creators? Like, what really pops in your mind is like, this is extraordinary, this is remarkable, this is, a skyscraper piece of content?
The way I see this ghost kitchen and with content creation, they're formulas, right? There's different formulas for how you could create that content. So what we've started doing is we've created our own concept of content. I call it crack content. And that's content that's designed to be addictive. And it's designed to provoke, right? Crack content. We get people addicted because you know what? I'm leaning into this concept that social media is addictive and it's blah, 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 blah. All right, great. So I'm going to create content because that's what everybody's doing anyways. Everyone is trying to create content. They're putting in all of these like psychological tactics and they're trying to manipulate people. They're trying to get people to push buttons. They're trying to do all these things. So essentially I took that and turned it into crack content with some people from my team. The content's designed to be viral. The content's designed to appeal to that ADHD brain of everybody's. And you could see it in action with people like Nikki, Big Nick BH. There's another client that we have, Non-Toxic Dad, who's just killing it right now. I think he's gotten 10 million views just this month. A lot of the times, and a lot of these views come from like 20% of the videos, right? It's very much that 80-20 rule where 20% of the videos are driving 80% of the views. But in order to get to that level, you got to continue to iterate. And then at some point you find that sweet spot. So for Non-Toxic Dad, he has this shtick of canceling certain foods that are toxic. For Nikki, she has this shtick of I'm in my 80s. This is what I learned in my 20s, right? So you start to develop these series ideas as you create content, as you get feedback, and as the world changes and things evolve and stuff happens. You feed off of all of that. I see fast content like fast food, right? That's why I'm using, that's why I say it's a kitchen. And we have this like assembly line where we have different creators doing different parts of building this content or creating this recipe before we serve it to the clients.
And what would be an example of something that kind of flopped, but you weren't expecting it to?
Like content wise?
Yeah. Some sort of campaign or initiative. They thought this has legs. This is going to really go somewhere. And it didn't. Maybe you could share some lessons as to why.
There's flops all the time. It's like sometimes you invest in creating a video and it doesn't work, even though it's like a good concept. A lot of times it just comes down to how it starts, right? There's this study, I think I heard this from Mr. Beast, where it's like once a viewer watches 20% or 25% of a video, they tend to watch the whole thing. So a lot of times if content doesn't work or if it fails, it has to do with how it starts. It has to do with what the hook is. It has to do with what the transition is. Like the viewer needs to understand what they're going to be getting before they decide to invest, even if it's 45 seconds into that content, right? So I think a lot of content is going to flop, and that just is the nature of the game. And that's why you just got to have more times at bat. That's why I'm always saying to clients or people that I'm consulting with that, you want to aim to hit 20 videos a month or 30 videos a month, just so that you have more opportunities and you get more feedback. Because that's the beauty of what's happening right now is the feedback. That's also something that I talk to a lot of the new hires that we have, especially like younger professionals. I think there's so much talent with younger professionals. That's why I'm specifically looking to create an environment for them, because a lot of the clients that I bring in, right? Like I don't even have a ton of clients. I think I have like 8, 9 clients right now, because it was really hard to handle so many clients and do this thing. It was just mentally a lot of bandwidth. And it was just recently that I finally created the systems and processes that allows me to handle more content creation at scale, because that becomes part of what we offer people is we're going to help you create high quality content that's relevant to your audience at scale, right? We're talking 20, 30 videos a month. Soon, like later this year, the goal is to help some clients get to 60 videos a month or whatever it is, right? But it's also for me to start bringing on more clients that are at that level, at a certain level. Because then what happens is in the environment, I'm bringing in young professionals that are really creative and talented, and I'm getting them to work on projects with successful people to some respect, right? So that way they get rapid feedback. So anyone that's working on these projects all of a sudden is getting rapid feedback on their work. And then it helps them advance their careers a lot faster than they normally would working with a lot of like the small companies or brands, which is not a bad thing. It's just I'm trying to create that environment where growth could happen a lot quickly, right? Like my job is to facilitate it. My job is to orchestrate it. That's why I call myself the digital maestro. Musicians play their instruments. I play the orchestra. And that's what I mean by that is I do view this in that fashion where the musicians are people that have their phones, their keyboards, their mice, their computers. Those are the digital instruments that they're playing, that they're tapping, that they're doing. And essentially, I'm orchestrating them, and then the client is the person that's the face. They're the ones that are looking at the audience, right? And we're essentially creating an integrated brand experience that everyone is listening to across the world, right? Unlike an actual orchestra where you go to an event, everyone's sitting in the stadium. In the digital world, these platforms are creating a stage, and it's being communicated to people around the world across space and time.
Do you think there's a role for AI here with scaling this content up, or do you think that people are going to abuse that and we're just going to be in a wash and a lot of deep fake garbage?
Yeah, I could already see that there's going to be a lot of deep fake garbage. It's coming, and like a lot of like actors and celebrities have already started doing that, where they're basically licensing out their image to, let's say somebody wants to shoot a commercial all the way in Germany and the actor doesn't want to go there. Boom, just license that image and then they'll create that commercial in Germany. So I think it's starting with that first as the whole entertainment industry becomes revolutionized. And I do think it's happening amongst everyday people as well. But it's kind of like when that AI Drake song came out, which was really good. But it started to create that conversation amongst people. And I think there's some people that skew to, oh yeah, it's fine, I'll whatever, as long as it's good. It doesn't matter if it's computer generated, it's human generated. And then there's that other group that is, I only want to support human artists. I think there'll be a mixture. I know AI is enhancing and accelerating everything that we're doing as a company. I think it's going to do that for everyone across the board. It probably will get riddled with a lot of crap, even though there is a lot of crap. But at the same time, all these platforms, whether it's Google or any of these social media networks, are pretty good at being able to let the good stuff come to the top.
Mm-hmm. Are there any particular tools that you want to mention that you're using internally, AI based?
Otter AI is a pretty fun tool. Otter.ai is the tool. It basically follows you to whatever meeting. So anytime connects with your Google Calendar, so anytime you go into a Zoom meeting, a Google Meets meeting, whatever it is, It'll automatically come there, and then it'll record the meeting and transcribe all the notes and then even outline it for you. I think that's huge. There's creative AI tools that are coming out. I think we're waiting for Adobe Firefly. They've talked about it, but I don't think they've released it to everybody yet. That's gonna be a really fun tool. I think that's gonna accelerate it. Otter AI is in itself a game-changing tool. If not that, other tools that are like that. There's another one called like SEMA or something. But just the ability to transcribe meeting notes and then being able to manipulate that text, there's so much you could do with that. I know it's helped me immensely, especially when I'm developing strategies with the clients. I have these really deep, intensive calls, and then being able to take those transcriptions and then manipulating that data into creating full comprehensive strategies is really powerful. And it's been a game changer. I mean, it takes a long time even to do it when I'm doing it with this, but imagine if I didn't have that tool, it'd just be, I think it takes things that would take months to occur in like days or a week.
Where do you think things are going in terms of micro influencers? So influencers of really small niches, but also influencers who just have a small following in a more macro niche.
I think influencers in themselves have like a stigma attached to them as well. I don't think a lot of people want to be labeled as influencers. I remember watching this video of, I think, Logan Paul, who like said that he was an influencer, but then said it in a way where he was a little bit embarrassed about it. And then the host called him out on it. And he's like, yeah, I don't really want to be associated with that. I think a lot of the micro influencers, or just people that are content creators that want to be the next YouTuber, Logan Paul, Mr. Beast, or a subject matter expert, whatever it is, I think they're going to realize that you got to become an expert in some kind of field, and then you got to market that expertise. I think the time where people become famous for famous, like that's there, but I think the new path, or what a lot of people are going to be focused on, is becoming famous for your expertise. Right. That's essentially the premise of my book, which is Guru Inc., which is about that. It's literally about becoming famous for your expertise. Because like the journey that I went on, and I grew up with spiritual gurus, right? Like I had spiritual gurus growing up. Like there's a picture at my family's house, the guy with the turban. And, you know, that was our guru. So we would always pray to him, or, you know, whatever it is. And then over time, I realized guru is just a term that they call a popular expert. And I think it was because that's how my life originated. I always worked with gurus. Mike Berry, who I was mentioning to you, is a real estate guru. Neil Patel, marketing guru. Kimberly Snyder, nutrition guru, right? Like throughout my life, I've always worked with people where I'm essentially helping them become gurus. And over time, I realized that however I was helping them create their personal brand was based off of a model that I could now put a label on because I know it, but at the time I didn't really understand it, because it was like I was, you know, trying to make this person like Oprah or make this person like Martha Stewart. So what is that? Eventually I realized that term is called a celebrity authority. So there's 5 levels of authority in any profession. And it kind of reminded me of like what the caste system was in India. And it seems like it's like a caste system for professionals. Everyone essentially starts off as a generalist in whatever field that you go into. The generalist is the jack of all trades, right? If you have a cold, you go to a generalist doctor. But then if you start having heart problems, you're not going to go to that same guy. You're going to go to the next level, which is a specialist. The specialist is someone that is really honing in on that craft. As the specialist hones in on that craft, as they become much better at it, they start to want to go to that next level. That next level is called the authority. So now you're at an authority level. An authority is essentially someone that's creating original content. It could literally mean author, right? Authority author. So it could mean a book. It could mean research papers. Essentially, the authority is the authority once you have peers that review what your content is and accept it. So that's the authority level. But the problem is most people don't know authorities because they didn't market themselves. So in order to go to that next level is called celebrity, right? This is when you become a guru. This is when you become famous for your expertise. So in order for you to go from generalist, specialist, authority, then to the next level, which is celebrity, you need to learn how to market yourself. You need to learn how to develop on-camera charisma. You need to learn how to communicate effectively in ways where what you're saying is being remembered by other people. And that's not easy. It takes time. It takes coaching. It takes development. It takes practice. It takes a lot of iterations for you to get to that level. But once you're at that level, you want to be at that level because at that level, people start gravitating towards you. More opportunities start to show up to you. You start to experience more of these synchronicities where people see you and find you and discover you and want to be associated with you, right? So this is where you become the guru. This is when you become a leader in your industry. And then the next level, the highest level, is called the celebrity authority, or I call it the guru's guru. This is your Oprah. This is your Martha Stewart. This is your Ellen. This is your Dr. Oz. This is your Neil Patel. This is your Tony Robbins. This is your Mike Ferry, right? Whatever niche that you're in, there is a celebrity authority. That's the highest level you could be in your field. And that celebrity authority could become so powerful, that could become so influential. It could even take them to the White House, right? When you look at guys like Donald Trump, he was a celebrity authority. When you start to understand that, that's essentially the premise of the book. My goal with the book is to get people to think different, to see things differently, so that they could leverage what's available to them today. Because what took Oprah 30, 40 years to do before, maybe even longer, what took a lot of these people that we know all this time to do could be done in a fraction of time now.
That's definitely an exciting time to be alive.
Exactly.
And I know we're running out of time. So what does it cost to work with you and what does that look like?
So it will vary between different people and ultimately the goals. So best thing would be to have a call with me for us to determine what that's going to be, what that engagement's going to look like. I would give you a range that it's in the high 5-figure to 6-figure range over the course of a year. And I always like to, just like an SEO, right? An SEO, people kind of come into this idea of I'm going to get top rankings in a month or 2 months, whatever. Similarly to SEO, when we're working to build your brand on social media, I always preface that within the first 3 to 6 months is when you start to see things trickle in. Within the first 1 to 3 months is when you start to see more of the perception change. 3 to 6 months is when you start to see business and more opportunities trickle in. And then 6 to 12 months is when you start to see much more exponential gains. And that becomes what we talked about, return on attention created. If it's TV opportunities, it could be that. It could be speaking deals. It could be brand deals. Whatever it is to you, that starts to happen in about 12 months.
Well, very good. Well, if our listener wants to work with you or even just learn from you, get your book, of course, follow you on social media, all that sort of stuff, where should we send them?
Best place right now is Instagram, AJ, the Digital Maestro. Follow me there. That's where I'm going to be talking more about the upcoming book, more client success, and I'll be sharing more tips.
Awesome. Well, thank you, AJ. That was fabulous and inspiring. I loved your story of struggle and yeah, all the cool stuff you've been up to. So thanks for sharing. And thank you, listener, for learning and growing. We'll catch you in the next episode. I'm your host, Stephan Spencer, signing off.